Hi, I'm Jeff Johnston, host of the Living Undeterred podcast. This is a reminder that we're going on tour next summer. Yes, that's right. We're going on tour. The Living Undeterred U.S. Tour 2022. We're leaving on May 9th next summer. We're going to every state and we're raising $1 million. That's the plan to change the narrative on mental health, substance abuse, and addiction. We need your help, though. I cannot do this alone. I know there's a lot of people out there interested in this project of ours. You can go to our website, www.livingundeterred.com. We need volunteers. We need state partnerships. We need sponsors. We need as many people as we can to get out there and help those people that need help to change the narrative on mental health, substance abuse, and addiction. Again, go to livingundeterred.com and click on the Living Undeterred icon, and all the information is there. Again, thank you very much for the support, and as always, keep living undeterred. Hello, I'm Jeff Johnston. Welcome to the Living Undeterred podcast. I am excited to finally get to record this episode with Daniel Ross. Him and I have been trying for quite a while to hook up, and we had something scheduled, but the first time ever in doing the Living Undeterred podcast, I absolutely forgot, and he was hanging on, waiting for me, and so in other words, I just blew him off, and I felt terrible, but I didn't apologize, but we reset it, and then we had a time zone issue, and we're finally here, so we finally made it, and I'm really excited because in our pre-interview we had a couple weeks ago, your story is quite amazing, and I want to make sure that the followers and listeners and watchers of the Living Undeterred podcast can hear another story of somebody who is really trying to live undeterred. So with that, Daniel, why don't you introduce yourself real quickly and a little background. You're from Indiana, is that correct?
Well, I live in Jeffersonville, Indiana. I'm originally from Mississippi, and I lived in the South my whole life, nearly. I've lived up here the last 11 years. I lived in Florida, numerous cities in Florida, lived in Houston, Texas, and I dabbled into drugs at a much too young age of 5 to 6 years old. And
yeah, when I heard that the first time you told me that, my jaw dropped because 5 to 6 years old, you should be playing t-ball with your dad somewhere in a little league ballpark and not be dabbling with drugs.
Yes, sir, and that's the thing. I was playing t-ball, but I was high. And it was unbelievable that to look back now and think of a 5-6-year-old kid being high, hitting a ball off of a t-ball at a game in front of so many adults and other children, not having a clue, and just me being me. That was the norm for me, though, because of my older brother, who thought it was cool and funny to get me high and stoned in front of all of his friends. So I started doing it by myself on the side, and it steamrolled from there.
I mean, I still can't imagine 5 years old. That's I have a hard time wrapping my hands around that, Daniel. That's hard for me to imagine, especially your older brother, thinking that this was going to be funny or cute or whatever, and getting a child high. I mean, was it just marijuana, or was there other drugs involved, or and this stemmed from somewhere. I mean, your brother didn't do this because he loved and cared about you. There was something in that relationship that was dysfunctional, or he wasn't confident, or had some issues with codependency or something,
I believe it was mainly my mom and dad split up, and we were going through that phase, and he chose the drug route rather than, being an older brother and showing me how to properly live as a child.
Right.
But
how much older was he, Daniel?
5 years. About 5 years older than me.
Obvious. So if he was 10, then he was. So he was doing drugs himself at 10.
Yes, he was just a little kid.
Where were all these drugs coming from?
He was. Well, we had at the time we had a little woman that my mom was friends with, her name was Carol, and she was giving him the marijuana, and he was smoking it with me. And then she would give him free little bags, and he would bring them home. And then it started with, I got drunk for the first time at 6 years old off a Red Dog beer. And it was the worst tasting beer I'd ever had. I haven't drank it since. I think they stopped making it, but they had Red Dog and Red Wolf. And I still remember how disgusting that was, but I remember being all drunk and stumbling around, and he thought it was funny, and my mom was, I think she went somewhere that night or something. We were at Carol's, and we were out back, and we were drinking with some older guy that I guess was one of Carol's friends, and he didn't have a problem with a 6, 7-year-old getting drunk. Like, I don't.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I look back now, and if I would have been an adult witnessing that, I would have immediately stepped in. Like, that is just not right.
There must be something with the word red, because my first experience with substance abuse that I can even recall, my first traumatic experience was one time when I moved in 5th grade. So it had to have been in 3rd or 2nd grade. My older brothers, Steve and Scott, were doing the cool older brother things, and they were chewing tobacco. And I remember my mom and dad weren't home. We were sitting in the bathroom, and my brother had a pouch of Red Man chewing tobacco.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Red Dog and Red Wolf. Well, mine was Red Man.
I remember the Red Man. It came in
I know, a little
bag.
pouch.
It came in a bag, and you opened it up, and you dip in.
And I remember it smelled so damn good. It was all moist. And
yeah.
My brothers chewed Skull chewing tobacco.
Yeah.
And it was the loose leaf one. It wasn't in the little whatever you call them now, whatever. And I remember opening it up, and my brothers put the chew in, when they were doing their thing. And I took a leaf out, and I put it in my mouth, and I swallowed it. And I turned to my brothers, and I go, "What am I supposed to do?" And they go, "You didn't swallow it." I go, "Yeah." And I tell you, man, I was so freaking sick. I puked and puked, and I've never chewed tobacco since that day.
Oh no!
So maybe there's something in this. Is get your kids, chewing tobacco when they're 4, and let them swallow a bag and let them puke. I don't know. Maybe that's the way we fight this, because all the other stuff seems to not be working. Obviously, I'm being sarcastic, but that was my indoctrination to substance abuse. And I never smoked and never chewed tobacco. And I have to think that experience I had in 3rd or 4th grade had something to do with my bad experience with that.
And then let me say this: after getting drunk for the first time, just 2 short years later, I snorted my first line of cocaine.
Come on.
So at the age of 9, I'd snorted cocaine.
Holy cow. That's crazy.
And I remember and I lived in Florida, so it was probably fresh off the boat because of all the smuggling of drugs in Florida. And I remember my mouth and face got so numb. And my brother was sitting there coaching me, telling me, hold my head back and pull my nostrils apart and suck in really hard. And I did that, and my throat was so numb that I could barely breathe.
You and I didn't discuss this in the pre-interview, so I'm not really sure where this is going to go, but I have to throw it out there. So where's your relationship with your brother today?
I have nothing to do with him. He's been in and out of jail since I was 10, 11 years old. He got on juvenile probation, and then he got on adult probation as soon as he turned 18. And I think he's been on probation probably 3/4 of his life. He's now nearly 40 years old. He's currently locked up, and he has been locked up at least 40 to 50 times. And he's been to several rehabs. He's been to 5 or 6 halfway houses. and it just nothing seems to work with him. It's just like he gets out, goes right back to the same group. You got to change your people, places, and things. That's one of the first things they teach you. And they teach you to not only, be a sponge in life and soak in the information you gather through every AA meeting. He would go in there and cross his arms and sit back in the chair and not care. While the thousands of AA and NA meetings I've been to, I've actually listened to these people and heard their dramatic and traumatizing experiences. And I've heard of people selling their yachts for drugs and selling their mansion homes for drugs and selling their coupes and Bentleys and just the most tear-dropping stories you would ever hear.
Let's peel back a little bit, because when I first came across you on LinkedIn, what drew me into your story the most was you were very passionate or impassioned about having a platform to tell your story. Now, you're 34 years old, I'm 55, so you're way ahead of me, and I didn't really start being vulnerable just till the last couple of years publicly. But I admire what you were doing, and you were pretty much aggressive. And hey, I want to be on your podcast. I want to tell. You didn't have any clinical background. You don't have a PhD in psychotherapy. You're not a neurologist. You're not a theologian. You're not. You don't have this resume that a lot of people have when they're out there trying to get on podcasts. But I tell you what, your story is as compelling story as I had heard, and it gets even more compelling when you told me that your mom and you overdosed on the same day. Tell me about that.
On the same day, it was July 30th or July 31st of 2003. It was a week after my birthday. I'd been partying all week. I had did so much cocaine that the doctors told me I had enough cocaine in my body to kill 10 human beings. And I had enough pills in my system to kill 30 horses. I had Oxycontin in my system. I had Loratabs. I had Xanax. I had Valium. I had cocaine. I drank some rum that was so old it was red. That's how old this rum was. And I drank that. And I guess I just fell asleep on my bed, and if it wouldn't have been for my buddy Joey coming and opening up my window like he normally did, and he threw something at me and I didn't budge, and he said, "That's weird." So he climbed through my window, and he said he started to shake me, and I was making a noise, and that my eyes were flickering back and forth. And he said he started screaming for somebody in my house. Well, my dad was in his room, and my mom was in the bathroom right across the hall from my bedroom, and she had already overdosed. So when they called the paramedics for one overdose, they'd went to open the bathroom door, and they couldn't because she was wedged against the door. So they had to pretty much push their way in and revive her. Well, I was in a 4-day coma, and she was in a 2-day coma. But mine was so severe, I had to learn how to walk again. I had to learn how to use my arms properly. My speech, it was like I was drunk, like I slurred in my speech, and I couldn't really remember half of what was going on. But then the older I've gotten now, the more I've, been able to look back and remember bits and pieces. And I was partying with friends that night, and I snorted way too much cocaine, and it caused me to overdose. And I spent 2 months in the hospital at Sacred Heart, and they took really good care of me. I did physical therapy there for a little bit, and then from there I went to Tampa, Florida, and did even more physical therapy. And then from there, I was taken out of my parents' custody, put into the state of Florida's custody, and I was sent to a boys' home in Pensacola, something I didn't know too much about. I didn't know too much about Pensacola. I'm not scared to say it, I was from Fort Walton Beach. I was from Fort Walton Beach, Destin area, partying all the time. And so all that with my mom still in the hospital while all this is going on was killing me. And I was on probation on top of all this. So I get violated and sent away for 10 months, 2 months after going into this boys' home. And I can barely walk. I could barely do anything. And it was insane. It was the most insane experience.
Hey, could I have you do one thing? Just the camera a little bit more that way so I can get you a little more. There, right about there. That's good. That's good. So let me go back to, so your mom overdosed in '03, but then she soon passed away right after that, correct?
Yes. She passed away the following year in nearly the same month we'd overdosed. She passed away on August 27th, 2004. And I was 6 weeks away from getting out of my program.
Wow.
And I had literally just went on a home visit from my program. They allowed me one home visit, a Friday afternoon through a Monday morning. And I remember the last conversation I had with her. She grabbed my hands and she started crying her eyes out. And she said, "I'm sorry, I've been such a horrible mother. I should have been there for you." And she got really emotional, and it touched me. And going back to the program was so hard. But
yeah,
you gotta push forward. You gotta stay positive. You can't really. You just gotta move forward.
So how old were you when she died, Daniel?
I had just turned 17.
Yeah, so I can certainly relate with my two boys, Ian and Roman, because their mom, my wife of 21 years, and anyone that follows this knows what happened. She passed away as well about 4 months ago, and they were 18 and 20. But when their older brother died, they were 13 and 15, and those are very impressionable ages. And not only are you going through your own hormonal issues and your own questioning certain things, then you lose your older brother, who's normally should have been a mentor. Like in your case, your older brother should have been your mentor, and then you lose your mom. Like in your case, your mom as well. Pretty much. Well, we'll leave it at that. And again, you have at 34 years old now been able to look back on your life, and instead of saying "woe is me," I'm going to get drunk, I'm going to commit a robbery or a felon, I'm going to lie to people. You found a way to say, you know what, I'm going to take care of myself first. I'm going to get myself strong, and then I'm going to open up to new relationships, but be very protective of those relationships, because people say that you become the 5 closest people in your life is pretty much who you are. And so you want to be very careful that you pick 5 people that you aspire to be, or challenges you to be a better person. But I think what you're doing, Daniel's heroic would be an understatement, man, because I mean, man, you've got so many reasons, so many excuses to be doing other things right now than being on podcasts talking about sobriety. Now, how long have you been sober? And is this something that you continually fight every day?
Yeah, it's a everyday fight. It really is. Nobody ever forgets their sobriety date. I got sober on July 23rd, 2009.
Oh, wow.
And
Awesome,
I got sober on my birthday. And rather than, going out and getting plastered, that was my sobriety date. And I've been so proud to say that, and I gotta tell some listeners that, are thinking to themselves, well, why can't my kid just stop? Because it's not that easy. It is a disease. Right. It is almost like your body can't do anything until you have that drug in you. Especially for people who use heroin, cocaine, Loratabs, Oxy. They literally can't get out of bed or go to the store without having a little bit in them. And I've had the pleasure of meeting tens of thousands of different people, and I've been so proud to say, I've lived in so many different states, and I've learned so many cultures, and positivity is what gets you through life. If you think positive, do positive, and remain positive, and lay your head on your pillow at night, knowing you did something good, you will have nothing but good results. And if there's people out there saying, oh, well, I've been good my whole life and it's coming. Because karma is real, and I believe in karma. And like my brother, for instance, he just wrote my grandma some ridiculous letter saying he's found God, but that is the 19th letter she has gotten from him where he's found God. And some people, honestly, I think once they reach that jailhouse mentality, they can't get past it. They just feel, I guess their self-confidence is such in the gutter that they can't get out of it.
I remember you telling me when I first met you, you said, because I was telling you my story, and you said, well, that's awesome. I appreciate you being vulnerable. And you said, hey, Jeff, I just want you to know nothing's off limits. You're like, I can talk about anything. So I'm going to ask you about your dad, because I think of my two boys. So I'm putting you back at this age when you were 14, 15, 16, 17. And I'm not tooting my own horn, but as much of a role model I've been to my two boys, to quit drinking, to write a book, to start a nonprofit, to do a podcast. I mean, I'm trying to show my boys how to live an inspired life, not tell them. You didn't have that, and you didn't have your mother's support, and you didn't have your older brother's support. So how in the hell did you not join them, I guess? I mean, it's mind-boggling to me, because where did all your support come from then? It didn't seem like you had any.
Well, really, it mainly, for me, I had to raise myself as a child. So I had to grow up at a very early age. And I met some of the most wonderful people, even in my 10-month, 2-day program, that had barbed wire everywhere like we were in prison. But there was a man in there, Mr. Johnson, and he every day read me something from the Bible. He would tell me something positive. And then I have my 91-year-old grandmother in Houston, who has let me live with her 3 different times. I just talked to her the other day, and the door is always open for me to just go back to Grandma's. But, if I feel like she needs the help, I will go there and I will live with her. I will uproot my life, and she has done so much for me that I would pay it back for her, because that's how much she means to me.
I have a question for you, and I'm not sure it'll be a tough question, but I have to ask you. But I was speaking with someone the other day, and they have a 34-year-old son. I think he's 34, right around your age, in and out of rehab, struggling with all the collateral damage that goes with being an alcoholic or a substance abuse user, heroin, everything. And I've talked to her on the phone a number of times, and the same theme is there. How can I help this person? How can I get them in a facility where they can get help? And I'm like, I wish I could just say, something's going to click, or you got to tough love them, or you got to unconditional love them, which I hate that term. But I mean, now you are that person, but you're on the other side of the fence. You've stopped all this stuff. You seem to be in the right direction, but yet you admit that you battle this every day. What do you tell these parents out there that are saying, I want my son to be Daniel Ross? I want him to have seen why, I want to see why their choices are very poor and the consequences are the main thing they should be focusing on. What do you tell somebody who's really struggling with a child that simply isn't interested in bettering their life?
Well, first of all, if he's an alcohol user, he goes to nothing but AA meetings. If he's a narcotic user, a meth, whatever it is, NA.
Yeah.
Because
And one thing we should say is she too, because in this environment we're in too, we got to be careful about always saying he. People may be offended by that. So they, I guess, is a better word. If they, I say he all the time too. I'm just old school, but I think if they have an issue, then they need to go to AA. You say, I guess. Let me pinpoint this. The last person I talked to, she was very critical in the facilities not starting with mental health. In other words, their son was an alcoholic, their son was an addict, their son abused all these things. But the issue was a mental health issue. But it seemed like the assessment wasn't there. It was difficult to get that diagnosis. They just wanted to bypass that. But do you see issues with that, where the mental health facilities or the organizations out there catering to people like you aren't looking at the mental health part of it as seriously as they should?
yeah, a lot of them don't. A lot of them are there to collect that insurance money and get you out of there. And then you'll actually run across some good ones that want to take you under their wing and help you in any way possible. And it also helps the parents to go to Al-Anon meetings, because they learn about, drug use and why people use drugs and why people would, use it as a Band-Aid. They would use drugs because that's what a lot of people are hurting so bad, or they think about a suppressed memory that they haven't gotten out. So I'd say if anybody, or if anybody's having an issue with drugs or understanding drugs, I think they should definitely check out an Al-Anon meeting. And all you'd have to do is Google it in your area, and I'm sure they do it virtually. You could even have your son, admit it to a therapist that could possibly get to the root of the issue of why they're using. Because
what do you do about the person who just simply doesn't want any help?
I have a little story for you. My uncle had hit rock bottom. He was 38. He was sleeping on a park bench, and he had the shoes stolen off of his feet. Well, then, within 18 months, he was a certified therapist. He was helping people, getting them off the streets, and some people just need to hit rock bottom. And then some people, I have to use my brother, because I have literally been watching him for 25, 30 years destroy himself. And he was a heck of an athlete. He's a good-hearted person, and he meant well whenever he was sober. But as soon as that first Oxycontin went up his nose, or anything, he would just change totally. And there's just some people out there that, to understand the drug, you need to either research it, go to an Al-Anon meeting, or, just have your son, daughter, your cousin, your uncle, whoever you're worried about, have them go to a specialist.
I hear so much in the rehab world when you have the addicted person and you have somebody, you have collateral damage. So you have a spouse or you have a child that really loves the person that's, say, an alcoholic or a drug addict, and you get kind of thrown in your face. Well, you don't care about me. You judge me too much, or I'm your son. You should love me unconditionally. And that term is thrown around very haphazardly today. And I wrote a blog a while back called Unconditional Love with a question mark, because the way I look at it, Daniel, and see what you think about this. This is aimed at all the parents out there that are just absolutely sick and tired of this, and they've at their life is so miserable now that they're considering suicide themselves to get out of the situation of an addicted child. I mean, it's that bad. Uh, I say to them, unconditional love doesn't exist. Your love is limitless, but it has conditions. In other words, I have enough love in me to love you, all the love in the world, but I have conditions, because unconditional love by definition means you can F me over a million times, but I'm still going to love you. You can treat me like dog shit and I'm going to still love you. That seems like that's an unhealthy relationship to be in. If you allow somebody to basically torture and abuse you and everything that goes with that, but you're going to love them unconditionally. I call BS on that. I don't like that term. I've never liked it. I think at the end of the day, when you're in relationships with somebody who is an addict, you need to lay down the line and say, you know what? I love you unconditionally, yet my love has limits. I mean, I'm sorry. I love you limitless, but my love has conditions. And those conditions are you don't lie, you don't steal, you don't cheat, you don't do all these things. And you mentioned rock bottom, and rock bottom for your brother was having his shoes stolen off a park bench. Rock bottom for some people is death. And I don't know how else to term it that way. And I hate to sound so fatalistic, I guess, in my approach to this. But the hardest thing I've ever witnessed in my life is the inability to get someone to see destructive behavior, and there's not a damn thing you can do about them to change.
It's sad. A lot of these drugs nowadays are cut with fentanyl. They use dry human feces. They'll cut it with that. They cut it with rat poison. They'll cut it with anything they can get their hands on. I've even heard of them crushing up birth control pills and Tylenol and mixing it in so it weighs it more. And that's just sad. Drugs aren't the same, especially as opposed to back in the day when people just got them and sold them. And nowadays, though, they're wanting to become millionaires overnight, so they're cutting their stuff so much that if you even do a line this big, you're going to be dead. And I say it's not worth the risk.
I've seen story after story of people that have recreationally just tried, anything from Xanax to, even marijuana, a joint with fentanyl, like you said, laced in it. And it's just instantaneous. I mean, I think through some of the stories I've seen, it's a mind-boggling to me that kids would dabble in this stuff today, knowing that it's Russian roulette. And back in the day when I was in high school, nobody ever died, man. I mean, nobody ever died. If they died, it was a car accident that a deer ran in front of them, or maybe they were drinking or something. But it wasn't like they were at a party and somebody just took a pill and all of a sudden your best friend just keeled over and died. That never happened. Now you're seeing parties in LA where 3 or 4 people are dying in one night, and parents are losing, their only 2 children at one party in one night, just stuff that you think would shake everybody and say, hey, this is serious shit. We got to start understanding, like you said, the why behind this. When Seth died, I think there was 60,000 overdoses in the United States, and now 5 years later, it's 96 or something last year. So, I mean, we're looking at a 50% increase in 5 years, and I don't think it's going in the other direction anytime soon. Do you? I mean, and how do we get this? How do we get this thing fixed? And this is one of the reasons why I'm doing this tour next summer, going around the country trying to raise money and awareness, because I can't wrap my hands around. We know more about all this stuff. We know more about everything we put in our mouth. Yet we're dying. We're unhappy. We're miserable. Why? Why do you think our society is so unhappy today?
I think COVID first of all had a big part into it, and people, when the government just started giving money out like candy, people were saying, "I'm not going to my $9 an hour job when I can make $600 extra per month," or
Right.
but really, and then you have your positive people that chose to work out at home, do renovations. I'm in the middle of about to paint my apartment right now. I mean, so you can choose to do things like that, or you can choose to go spend 5-6 hours on the phone hunting down for a drug you want. And you have to change your whole mindset. Even if it's waking up and coming out and smoking a cigarette first. Try coming out, getting you a bottle of water, lifting weights for a minute, and then going about your day, or taking a jog, or doing something positive. And
What are a few things? What are a few things you do? What are some personal things you do each day to stay on the road that you're on?
every morning I get my 40-pound little dumbbell, and I do 100 every morning. And then
Awesome.
I pick days where it's beautiful outside. It's been hot lately, but then again, it's been nice here in Jeffersonville over the last couple of days. But I'll go on a jog. I'll get in on my LinkedIn and help out somebody who has a question. I'll get on my public, because I'm in stocks, and I get on there and somebody has a question, I'll help them out, just so I'm doing something positive. So I'm not trying to beat somebody over for $5 or get over on somebody. You just really, it comes down to your people, places, and things. And if that's why back in the day they used to tell them go to 3 meetings a day, because they figured you'd be so busy you wouldn't have the time to go get high. But in my case, that's not true, because there's been months I've done no meetings. I've just kept the same toolbox that I've kept all these years. And by toolbox, I mean things I learned in AA meetings. And my 10-month program, my counselor in there was tremendous. But the staff were all assholes that wanted to treat you like you were in prison rather than in a drug facility. But they chose to send me to a level 6, but they were going to send me to a level 10 in Miami for 18 to 24 months. And my attorney said, "Yeah, right, not under his condition. You're not doing that. We'll sue you." So instead, they decided to do a level 6. And I need to get into this too with you, because I took ecstasy for the first time when I was 11. And in Florida, ecstasy was everything. Like, everybody was doing it. So my brother threw some party when my parents went out of town, and he gave me and my buddy one to try. And I got so messed up that I ran around butt naked. He had like 150 people in our backyard. They're all laughing. I could go into story after story. Like, I have had one ride that nobody could forget. And, I could even delve into a quick little story real quick about me getting deserted in New Orleans and being on the streets in New Orleans for a couple of days when I was living in Florida at the time. But we'd went there for Mardi Gras. My brother gets locked up in New Orleans, and here I am. I took about 12 or 13 Xanax bars, and I'm so out of my mind that I woke up leaning against some statue, and something in me, I guess, told me, carry your bag around. So I had my little bag of clothes with me. And then later on in the day, my bag of clothes gets stolen from me. And then I have a guy from a church who walks up to me, and he says, "You look like you need some help." And it was like a sign from God. Like he literally took me under his wing, and he brought me to some warehouse they were having a church function at, and he literally saved my life, though. And then my brother's fiance at the time ended up, her mom was furious that Michael got locked up in New Orleans. So she ended up coming and picking us up, and we, took it. And to this day, I feel like he should have at least kept his mind right to make sure. I didn't even know which we had a hotel, and I didn't even know where it was at, and I couldn't have found it being high off of 12 Xanax bars. Like, being on that many bars, you're so out of your mind that you can't do anything. And
I'm laughing because there's going to be people watching this thinking that you're just making up this as we go.
Oh, this ain't nothing made up about this. This is true.
No, it's an unbelievable story that you're still alive. It's an unbelievable story that you weren't kidnapped at a young age when you were out wandering around. It's just an unbelievable story that you're at 34 years old and you've been given all these extra chances to become a better person, and you've chosen the better road, not bitter road. And there's something about the essence of that I think people watching this can say, you know what? I haven't been through half of what Dan's been through, and I haven't been through half of what Jeff's been through, but they both seem to be on the better road. And so I'm trying to tell everybody with this podcast and with the stories I tell that there are people out there that have tremendous painful stories, yet they've chosen their suffering, and they've chosen not to suffer as much as they probably, as the average person probably would, or at least you and I have decided not to use these as excuses to define us. And I think that's key.
And if I can I put in one more little story? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Me and my best friend Joey had spent the night at my brother's house. Well, him and his friend went to pick up some more cocaine in Panama City, which was nearly 60 miles from where we were living at. And he already had a shoebox full of cocaine. So, out of nowhere, there's a knock at the door, and me being high as a kite on coke, I answer. I don't even look out the peephole. I'm thinking maybe it's my brother. They came right back because they forgot something. And next thing I know, I have a gun shoved in my mouth. And it's a guy with a mouthful of gold teeth. And he's telling me he's about to rob me. And he wants me to show him where the shit's at, and he's not leaving till he gets it. And so he walks me upstairs with a gun to the back of my head, because he had to have had somebody tell him exactly where it was at, because they literally walked me upstairs with the gun to my head and walked me straight into my brother's room and straight into his closet where it was at. And they got it. And it was almost like they had somebody keeping my brother away, because they were there for 2 hours feeding me and my friend Joey cocaine with a gun pointed at us. I guess thinking we would be so high we wouldn't remember anything, or I don't know if they were hoping we would overdose or so they wouldn't go down for murder. And not only that, he took my Xbox, he took all my games, he took, I brought my stuff over. I was spending the night with my brother. I didn't think I had to worry about something like that. But to have a steel gun stuck in your mouth to where it literally chips your teeth and he cocks the trigger, that's one of the scariest moments you could ever imagine, especially as a 13-year-old child. And my friend Joey was so horrified that I think it's even affected him to this day. And I haven't talked to my friend Joey in quite some time, but he's doing good. He's got his own business. He's doing masonry work. He's still living in Port Walton Beach.
Dude, if you were a cat, you'd have like one life left, man.
Actually, I'd be out of lives because there was another time. I can tell you, I could just keep going.
Of course there is. Of course there's another time.
Well, there's another time, and it was...
Holy cow.
It was me and my cousin John Michael were riding through some of the shadiest parts of Houston you can imagine. Because John Michael, he's my cousin. He's been in prison a couple of times, but he ain't nowhere near as bad as my brother. And he, for some reason, leaves me in his car and runs into the apartment complex. And then I have this big guy walk up to me and just gets in the car like he owns it and has a gun pointed at me and starts telling me to take off my jewelry. And he's going through the glove compartment while he's doing it. He's got his gun like this while he's looking through everything. And then my cousin, just thank goodness, comes out. And he had a gun too. And he had it pointed right at his head. And he said, if you do not get out of my car right now, I'll blow your brains out. And he got out of the car, gave me all my jewelry back, and we got out of that. But that was another scary, dramatic experience.
Did you tell him about the guy who shot his brains out upstairs?
And if you want me to, I can tell you about my friend Cody. And
yeah, I think we talked about that at the pre-interview. Yeah, I remember you talking about the suicide, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
He was my best friend. We had spent the night with each other probably 500 plus times. Everywhere we went together. He was, so out of his mind that he had the gun like this at his head. And he was screaming at his fiance, and he was pretty much like, I'll do it, and he tapped it too many times, and it went off, and I seen his brains fly all over the wall, and I seen his white body just slump to the floor, and it was like, as the seconds went, he was getting whiter and white. He instantly died. And I had to make the phone call to his mom and tell her. And she was so beside herself. She immediately started screaming, oh my God, this ain't happening. This is a joke. And I'm saying, no, it's not. No, it's not. I'm trying to tell you it's happened. It's done. I'm sorry to tell you. And I spent over an hour and a half trying to comfort her while I just witnessed all of it. And it was so traumatic to see your own best friend, somebody that, in my opinion, he looked up to me because he didn't have a brother. Right. And he was a year younger than me. So I was kind of like his mentor, and I
Yeah.
was sitting there telling him, like, man, are you joking? Like, you don't, come on. And he was just so out of his, and that's a big reason. That was probably one of the last factors that made me get sober.
As you're telling all these stories, Daniel, I have to go back to when I wrote my book. And as I was researching stories about Seth, everything from burglaries to, fights and arrests, because he was incarcerated as well, then he was in prison as well before he died. I kept thinking to myself, how many stories don't I know? I mean, this is probably 5% of what I know about my son from the ages of 15 to 23. And I have to think he had many similar brushes with getting robbed himself or other, he was only got caught a couple times committing crimes, but think of the ones that you get away with. I mean, for every 40 crimes you commit, you maybe get caught once. I don't know what the statistics are, but let me go back to how we can wrap this up because this is absolutely, I think to get to why your story is encouraging is you have to get through the muck, I guess, is how I term it in my book. I mean, to get to the good stuff, my 12 daily steps and my 10 principles of life I wrote with my son in my book. By the way, I'm going to get a copy out to you if I haven't already. I can't remember if I mailed it yet. Let me know if I did. But I wanted to end the book with an uplifting message that there is another road to always take. And you've kind of mentioned early on about disease, but you also mentioned the word choice about 15 times. And that's the name of my nonprofit, the Choices Network. And it's important to me that things may be a disease, but you ultimately have to activate that disease with a choice. And everything needs to be activated. So if we can break things down into choice first, disease later, then so be it. But I think my reason to have you on the show is as we end this show, this hour, is what nugget would you give someone out there that is struggling with these either personally or somebody they love, and what's next for you? What's next project or what are you going to try to do to get your story out there to help more people? And yourself.
I mainly want not only your listeners, but I want everybody to know that it is a everyday battle. It is something, it doesn't have an on-off switch. If it was that easy, we would have no drug addicts. And at the end of the day, your child, your mom, your dad, your uncle, they have to want it. You can't make somebody change. They have to want to change. And they have to want it. Like I wanted it. That 10-month, 2-day program, that was all for me. That's all I needed. There's some people, they just, like my brother, just choose not to. It's what you do.
Something I wanted to talk about real quick, and then we can wrap this up. But you mentioned the word battle, and I think one of the things I'm trying to do in this whole journey I've been kind of thrown into is changing the narrative and changing the stigma on either words we use or how we explain a situation. I looked at the death of my son and the death of my wife all within 5 years at a point in my life when I was at the top of the world and then I had these things taken from me as not a battle, but as another chapter to my story to kind of to absorb all of this into my story as I write chapters each day of my life. And I think that's a healthy way to look at these things. And that's why I quit drinking on December 24th, 2017. Yet I don't know how many days that is. I don't participate myself in even using the word sober because that implies a fight and it implies a battle. I am in no battle with anybody. And that's kind of how I think as I go out and talk to people is, you know what? We can keep using the words recovery and addict and sober and all these things. But I think if the numbers were getting better, then it would show evidence that this is working. But they aren't. And things are getting worse. And we keep using the same angles to commit this. So I'm like, all right, let's don't use the word battle anymore. Let's just say this isn't a battle. This is life. This This is something we are offered an opportunity to learn from, not to resist. And so fighting alcohol doesn't work, you know? And so you look at alcohol as just one of many things in your life that you choose not to eat or drink, like pizza, ice cream. Maybe instead of doing 50 weights, you do 100. Maybe instead of doing 100, you do 150. These are all conscious choices that you make. And just add alcohol as one of these choices. Don't make it some big, huge monster out there that you're fighting every day. That works for me. That works for me, Daniel. And I can't say it works for everybody, but I think if we just put alcohol and all these other things on the shelf with all these other things that we have, and then not all addictions are bad. There's lots of healthy addictions as well. And that really all this is just another chapter to our story. I don't know. Maybe that'll work for people. Who knows? Maybe people are going to find other ways to get themselves better. But I admire what you're doing. I think what you're doing has a lot of legs. I think there's a lot of people out there going to watch this say, "Holy crap, man! These two together, these guys could do a Netflix documentary on misery." You know. But we also have had a lot of great things happen in our lives too, man.
Yes, we have. Yes, we have. You have to be grateful for what you have. You have to be grateful for every day you wake up. You're able to open your eyes. You're able to kick yourself out of bed. You're able to make yourself a cup of coffee. There's some people out there, they're blind their whole lives. They're deaf their whole life. That's all they know. But that is, at the end of the day, they're still positive. And I'd even met one gentleman I met in Texas. He was deaf, but he was an alcoholic. And he would come to the meetings, and he'd sit in the very front row. So I sat next to him one day, and I'd actually told half of my story. And he came up and hugged me after the meeting.
Yeah, absolutely.
And said, he said, I thought I had it bad. And, he pretty much told me, thank you. And that made my day. Just telling him that story. And there's a couple other people that came up and said, thank you for sharing. And
it's the little things, the little tiny things. My whole book, the first chapter, talks about a 14-year-old that came up to me at a class I was giving a presentation about what happened. This is before my wife died. And he was 14, and he'd been in alcohol treatment, he'd been in rehab, and 14 years old. And I start my whole book with that story because that really set me on the path that I'm on. I realized, age of first use is 14 in the United States. And so if we're not having these conversations with our kids at 10, at 8, at 9 about addictions, and not necessarily heroin and overdoses, but about what you can be addicted to. What is an addiction? The consequences of lying, of being deceptive. And we can use these stories when they're younger and then morph them into substance abuse and things that, even sex, things that get more important to talk about as they get more mature. Well, listen, I've really enjoyed this immensely, and I'm going to walk away from this a better man, and which is selfishly one of the reasons why I went down this road of living undeterred and my projects I'm on, because if I'm not helping myself first, I can't help anyone else. And I heard you say that when we first talked, is that people think you're doing heroic things, but the first person you're trying to help is yourself.
And I just want to tell your listeners, be a sponge. If you have any problem, if you have any issue, feel free. Look me up. I will help you beyond belief. It's at the end of the day, they have to want it, and be a sponge. Soak in everything you can, even if it's something as small as what you do at the end of the night. Even if it's, what you're choosing to do right after work. Because I had guys I worked with, they'd go to the bar every night right after work.
Yeah.
You want to come, man? No, I don't want to come. I told you. Well, hey, and it's just, everyday battle, and it's not.
Yeah.
It's not like we're wanting to be
Right.
drug addicts. It's just it's sad, and there are.
You know, to change your life, change your environment. That's what I tell people. I mean, if you want to exercise, then either join a gym, make yourself go, or buy some exercise equipment, put it in your basement so you have to walk by it all the time. If you want to stop drinking, have no alcohol in your house, and don't go anywhere where there's alcohol. If you don't think you can handle it, then don't go around it. Create an island, build your own island where alcohol doesn't exist, and there's a pretty good chance you won't drink. But if you're going to bars after work to hang out with your friends because you want to be social, but you're trying not to drink, it's not going to work.
Because there's going to be, even if you go 20 times, there might be that
Right.
20th time,
One time.
you're like,
Yeah.
oh, I'll take a shot, and then that shot ends up turning into 8 shots, and you're not even able to drive yourself home, and you blew your sobriety. So,
Yep.
and really, you gotta be confident in everything you do. You have to be confident. You gotta be bold. You gotta, and for some parents, they have to be straightforward. They have to be tough. They have to take it. I mean, they have to understand to the fullest that this is a disease. This is not.
Well, let me tell you this, Daniel. You're easy to talk to. Anybody out there that wants to get a hold of you, what's the easiest way to reach you?
They can reach me at my email. It is dross87@mail.com. They can look me up on LinkedIn. Just type in Daniel Ross. You'll see a picture of me and my grandma. I'm in a Raptors uniform. I'm a big sports fan. I have over 30 jerseys. I have 10 signed mini helmets. Like, I chose to collect coins and gold and silver over drugs.
Yeah, there you go, man. Perfect. I love that.
I just bought one of the nicest Alaskan chunks of gold that's on its way to me. It's a 4-gram piece, but I only paid $160 for it. So I got it for $40 a gram.
But see, you have healthy addictions, and that this is where addictions. That word I hate as well, because when we say addictions in the context of just talking to people, that they take it as a negative thing. Like, well, I don't want to have addictions. Well, yeah, you do. You want to have healthy addictions, and have many of them, and be so addicted to healthy things you don't have time for the unhealthy addictions. You're too distracted. Well, this is awesome, man. I appreciate it, and often I meet people on my podcast that are clinically qualified. They have the designations, they have the college degrees, they have the client base. You and I don't have any of that, dude. I mean, we have the real life stories. Now, I don't have the drug stories. I cannot compete with you there. But I was a compulsive gambler for many, many years. Lost lots of money in Las Vegas, and I quit in my 30s. I've lost 2 people very close to me through as you have as well. And I was an alcoholic as well, as you were. But I've never did drugs. That's one part of this whole dynamic that's new to me that I'm learning about. I've had drugs in my life, certain people around me that have done drugs, but I've never done drugs. I've never smoked pot, never done cocaine, never done Xanax, any of these things. I always was afraid that I'd be Len Bias if I did drugs. I would die the first time I did it. And it wasn't that I didn't think I'd like them. It was I knew I would love them. That was the smart thing I guess I had going for me. Is I was smart enough to know, hey, dude, if you do these, you're dead. And so I never did drugs. But listen, thanks a lot very much. I love you like a brother. I really appreciate you coming on the show. And as I end every show, I don't have to tell you this, but I have to tell everyone else. Keep living undeterred. You can follow us on the Living Undeterred website. I have a blog, a podcast. I have a book available called This One's For You, an inspirational journey through addiction, death, and meaning that I wrote about our story. All the proceeds from everything I do goes 100% to my nonprofit. And next summer on May 9th, Daniel, we're starting the Living Undeterred U.S. tour. I'm going to every state in the United States. The hope is to raise $1 million over 92 days for mental health, substance abuse, and addiction. And I'll be reaching out to you on the tour and getting your help and support.
Definitely. And I'd love to be on another podcast and tell how I got on probation and that fun little part. Because that's...
Well, all you got to do, just go on LinkedIn and do what you did to me. Just harass me enough that I'll get you on my show. So, that's what I did. When I first came out with Living Undeterred, I just started reaching out to people. Hey, I want to talk about what happened to me. And next thing you know, I've got so many requests coming in, I have to manage them. And you talk enough, you're authentic, you're genuine, your story is compelling. And people can say after they listen to you, wow, what I'm going through is 10% of what Daniel went through. So if he can do it, I can do it, So listen, man, I'm going to let you run, but I very much appreciate what you're doing, and keep living undeterred, okay, bud?
Yes, sir. You take care of yourself, and I'll stay in contact with you. And I love you.
Well, brother.
Keep living undeterred. I love it.